Hello Planeswalkers! I'm back, and this first video coming back is on an old precon commander, Breya, Etherium Shaper. Breya is a 4/4 legendary artifact creature human that costs the full yore-tiller, that's white, blue, black, and red. When she enters, you create two 1/1 blue Tutor artifact creature tokens with flying. You may pay 2 and sack 2 artifacts to either have Breya hit a player or planeswalker for 3, give a creature -4/-4 for the turn, or gain you 5 life. So this deck is all about creating tons of artifacts both to generate mana and to sacrifice to Breya's ability. For our new deck, tech format, I won't be listing every single card in the deck, however I will be going over some highlights and I'll mention the strategies I implemented when building this deck. First up is going to be artifact creation. It's very important that you keep your number of artifacts up, otherwise you can't make use of Breya. But there are also some other payoffs in the deck that require you to have a bunch of artifacts. One way we have of getting lots of artifacts is Academy Manufacturer, a 1/3 artifact creature assembly worker that costs 3 mana. It says if you would make a clue, food, or treasure token, you instead make one of each. This triples the artifact value of anything that makes one of those 3 token types, making things like Tempting Contract and Treasure Vault much more effective. Other means you have of creating artifact tokens is Mirrodin Besieged, an enchantment that costs 2 and a blue, and when it enters, you choose one of the modes. Mirrodin, which creates a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token whenever you cast an artifact spell, or Phyrexian, which has you draw a card and then discard a card on your end step. Then, if you have at least 15 artifacts in your grave, target opponent loses the game. It's a fantastic way to add value to your artifact spells, and it doubles as a win con if you choose Phyrexian. Next up are Tutors, which can grab you your most powerful artifacts, or, in the case of Acquire, someone else's. Acquire is a sorcery for 3 blue that has you search an opponent's library for an artifact card and put it onto the battlefield under your control. Then they shuffle their deck. This is a very silly card and I love it a lot, because it expands your list of possible artifacts. That said, this card is best played in person. If you mostly play on Spelltable or some other software over the internet, I would recommend against running this card. I think the best traditional tutor in the deck is Arkham Dagson, a legendary human artificer for 3 and a blue that can be tapped to have target artifact creature's controller sacrifice it, then they may search up a non-creature artifact and put it into play. Since you can run a number of ways of creating Thopters, including Breya herself, you can turn those 1/1 tokens into much more valuable artifacts from your deck. With the emphasis on artifacts and how much you'll be sacrificing them, it's best to have ways of recurring non-token artifacts if need be. Goblin Welder is an excellent example of this, which is a 1/1 Goblin Artificer for a single red that can be tapped to swap an artifact on the field with another artifact in the graveyard of the player who controls the first artifact. This lets you swap token artifacts for non-tokens that are in your grave, or, in some circumstances, swap a Vidalcan Orrery an opponent controls for an Arcane Signet in their grave. Multi-purpose. If you want mass recursion, there's Open the Vaults, a sorcery that costs 4 white and returns all artifacts and enchantments to the battlefield under their owner's control. Since it sits everyone's graveyard, this is mass recursion, so be careful. Still, this can save your skin if you're in the late game with a lot of your bombs in the grave. Ah yes, the very general support category is full of cards I just love in this deck. Brutaclad, Telcor Engineer is a 4/4 legendary artifact creature, Artificer, for 4 blue-red. He gives your token creatures haste, and at the start of combat on your turn, he makes a 2/1 blue mirror token. Then you may choose a token you control, and all of your tokens become copies of the chosen token. Note that the effect doesn't end when your turn does, so if you turn all your treasures into 2/1 mirror, you're not getting those treasures back unless you make a treasure after that, and use Brutaclad to turn all the mirror into copies of it. This is a good way to turn all your non-creature tokens into creatures and vice versa. Master Transmuter is a 1/2 artifact creature human artificer for 3 and a blue. You can pay a blue and tap her to return an artifact you control to its owner's hand, and in exchange, you get to put an artifact from your hand into play for free. You can use this to cheat out an expensive artifact. The last one I want to talk about in this category is Time Sieve, an artifact that costs a blue and a black, and you can tap it and sacrifice 5 artifacts to take an extra turn. Look, this card can easily get super out of hand if you have a good artifact token generation. For example, if you have Treasure Vault and good enough mana generation to pay 6 for X when you sacrifice it, you can make 6 treasures. Sack one of them to Goblin Wilder to bring back Treasure Vault, then sacrifice the remaining 5 to Time Sieve, and you've got yourself an extra turn loop that you can do until your deck runs empty, or until someone blows up one of your pieces. If you can pay any more than 6 for X, you can start banking treasure tokens on each of those extra turns. For defense in this deck, a real good counterspell is Spell Swindle, which counters a spell for 3 blue and gives you as many treasure tokens as the mana value of the countered spell. Anything that gives you artifact tokens is good, and tacking token creation into a counterspell is wonderful. Padim, Consul of Innovation, gives your artifacts hexproof. Rebek, Architect of Ascension, gives them protection from each mana value among artifacts you control. Of course, you're in yore-tiller colors, so you have access to tons and tons of premium removal options, but I opt for Dispatch and Despark, since Dispatch is artifact themed and I just like Despark. For ramp, you've got mana dorks and mana rocks mostly. There are plenty of ways of encheapening your colorless and artifact spells, such as Ugin the Ineffable, which makes your colorless spells cost 2 less to cast. Mana rocks are also good, and since red and blue are the most common colors in my build of the deck, I opt to run Talisman of Creativity, which either taps for colorless or taps for a blue or red, and pings you for 1. Joy Res, one way of drawing you cards throughout the game, by drawing you 1 whenever you cast a historic spell. Historic spells being artifacts, legendary, and planeswalker spells. For your land base, you can run pretty much any dual lands you have the budget for, but I would highly recommend getting copies of as many of the artifact lands as you can. Ancient Den, Darksteel Citadel, Great Furnace, Sea of the Synod, and Vault of Whispers are the classic artifact lands that you can run in this deck, and since this list is a little old, I don't have any of the newer artifact dual lands, but those are also excellent options. Glimmervoid is an extra command tower that gets sacrificed on your end step if you control no artifacts. You should have no trouble keeping at least 1 artifact on the field to prevent Glimmervoid from diving into your graveyard. And that's the gist of it. This deck is super fun to pilot, and I think Breya is an incredibly fun commander. I've always loved multicolor decks more than monocolored, but I also don't really like 5-color decks because you end up with too many options. Hard to believe considering I have several 5-color decks, but I digress. Any deck building restriction makes things way more interesting, and running less than 5 colors is the simplest deck building restriction there is. I think yore-tiller is the perfect color combo for an artifact deck, although since green has gotten some ridiculous artifact support in recent months like Bootlegger's Stash, you might be missing out on that leafy green color identity with Breya. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment below letting us know what you think. It helps us out a lot. If you want to see more from us in the future, please subscribe. I'd also like to say that I greatly appreciate the patience from all of you across these past couple months. Things have been rough for both Tyler and I, and life has been complicated, and I'm just so thankful that you haven't all left in our absence. I hope you all have a wonderful day, as always. And Rebek, Artifact... Cat, you can cut this or leave it in if you think it's funny. You do whatever you want. Padim, Console of Innovation, gives you artifacts. It wouldn't be a Partners With video without flubbing the lines.